Everyone, good morning, good afternoon. First, I would like to start by thanking Ira, Severine, and Katie for this wonderful opportunity and for helping me all the way. Thank you so much for keeping this up and going. I'm Gayathri. I'm a first time mentor with Magic. I'm pleased to introduce my mentee, Saashi S. She is a freshman ninth grader is highly passionate about her work for computational biology, AI, and environmental science research. Sashi demonstrated consistent interest throughout our partnership, and I'm very proud of what she has accomplished in such a short time amidst being occupied with other programs during the first 2 weeks of our summer program. To align with her interest, we finalized Sashi's project on writing a research paper on an environmental biology topic, which she will be presenting shortly. I really appreciate her dedication and interest in drafting a paper, which was an output of lots of her hard work. I appreciate Sashi very much, being a first time mentee and having made excellent progress. I'm excited that we will continue to meet after this presentation to enhance her paper and get it reviewed from some senior scientists whom I know in my field and with an intention to publish it. Handing over to Sashi to present her amazing work. Thank you, everyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Saashi S, and I'm in ninth grade and I go to Cypress Bay High in Western Florida. Next slide. My mentor's name is Gayathri Devi. She's been working in Amazon as an engineer in a research team. She lives in Seattle where she enjoys cooking and reading books. Next slide. In this slide, I'll be sharing with you why I selected this topic for my research paper. Before that, I need to tell you a little story. In 2022, I discovered Shein and ordered a dress due to its low prices and popularity among my friends. When it arrived, I realized the fabric was cheap and quickly wore down, so I threw it out. Curious about where it would end up, I found that it would remain in a landfill for 500 years before degrading, a common fate for millions of clothing items. This led me to realize that the environmental harm I was unknowingly contributing to. After researching, I learned that polyester is the main reason for this resistance to biodegradation. Motivated to find a solution, I based my project on why fast fashion is difficult to biodegrade and explored sustainable alternatives. I wrote this paper to raise awareness among my generation and encourage companies to make sustainable changes. To complete this project, I had to study topics such as the chemical makeup of polyester, biodegradability, microplastic pollution, and the fashion industry's sourcing, manufacturing, and disposal practices. My goal is to have this research reviewed and published in a science journal. Next slide. In this slide, I wanted to talk about the properties of the alternatives that I based my research paper around, mycelium leather and Pinatex. Mycelium leather is primarily composed of chitin and proteins, which are the structural components of fungal cell walls. Mycelium leather is fully biodegradable, as it is composed of natural polymers that can be broken down by microorganisms. Pinatex is mainly composed of cellulose, making it biodegradable under the right environmental conditions, for example, temperature. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I'm going to be introducing the chemical makeup of polyester and the timeline of my project. Polyester is difficult to break down because of its synthetic chemical structure, which creates strong, stable bonds that resist natural decomposition. Its water-repellent properties and resistance to biological and environmental factors like microbes and UV light allow it to last for hundreds of years in the environment. Instead of fully decomposing, polyester often breaks into tiny plastic particles, adding to long-term pollution. Continuing on, below, I've included the timeline for how I completed the project. First, I picked a topic and wrote the abstract. Then I located and evaluated sources, organized my information. Then I wrote the draft and the intro and the bodies and the conclusion. And lastly, I put together all my references. Next slide, please. This is one part of my demo. Um, you have to put the audio on for it. I talk in the demo. Um, Are you able to hear it?
Yeah, I think it's not playing right. Do you think you can
I can talk
walk
over it.
us through?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. 1 second. So basically, in the start, I'm kind of introducing what my research paper is about, which is about the challenges of polyester and fast fashion biodegradability while exploring sustainable alternatives. So the first thing I have is my abstract, which is basically a summarization of the entire paper. I think I'm still talking, and then it scrolls down a little bit, and then I go to my introduction, which basically discusses the business model of fast fashion, the environmental impacts of polyester, and how polyester is very heavily relied on by the fashion industry, and how alternatives would prove beneficial to the environment and to the fashion companies. Then this is my literature review where I talk about in more detail the impacts of polyester and how it's used in the manufacturing, sourcing, and disposition process of fast fashion brands. I also talk about the evolution of polyester from the 1950s to now. I think I just expand more on that in this part. And then below, I include my methodology, which is basically just how I was able to narrow down, yeah, this is my methodology, how I was able to narrow down two alternatives. So for that, I had two sheets. One sheet where I had the categories in which I would weigh it in and the alternatives in which I would organize them in. And I just organized all the data. So, for example, I had biodegradability, ease of availability in the regions, ease of manufacturing, price of raw material, and negative repercussions. I also just picked the top 7 alternatives that were used by the top 50 companies of alternative polyester materials. And then I think I expand on that a bit more. And then I'm talking about the second part of the feasibility analysis, where I actually weigh each category and do the calculations. This is the second sheet. Basically, I weighed each of the categories. So, for example, biodegradability was the entire purpose of this project. So I had to give it 50% because it was the most important. And then on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the best, 5 being the worst, I rated it. And then in the bottom is the calculations, whichever one was the closest to 1, which was rated the best on each scale, would be the ones that I would pick out. So in this case, it was mycelium leather and Pinatex. And then here I just show you the scale that I used for each of the alternatives. This is the methodology and instructions to conduct your own if you would want to. And then I also include the coding that I use for the calculations. And then, yeah. So then in this part, I explain the pros and cons of the research paper and the methodology, and I just explain it in more detail. I also talk about the pros and cons of mycelium leather and how you can put that into the manufacturing system and what the results would be. In this part, I explain my results and I explain in more detail the properties of both mycelium leather and Pinatex. I also include a compare and contrast scale of non-synthetic fibers and synthetic fibers, just in case the feasibility analysis wasn't reliant enough. So my results in that yielded for non-synthetic fibers to be faster and easier to degrade than synthetic fibers, such as polyester. And then I think I'm also expanding here on it. And then in the end, this is my scale on synthetic and non-synthetic fibers. So I just included all the 7 alternatives and separated them into synthetic and non-synthetic, and then compared that to polyester, and in the category of biodegradability. And then I also expand on that. And lastly, I talk about the conclusion, which is where I compile all of my research and summarize my findings. And I also include a proposal for how I think the fast fashion system should be changed to fit in these alternatives. Yeah, so that was part one of my demo. You can go to the next slide. Part two of my demo is basically what I just said. It's the conclusion where I explain my findings and then summarize a proposition of how the fast fashion industry should operate with these new alternatives. Okay, next slide. So this is my slide on the magical experience. The highlights of my experience includes being able to pursue a solution that I believe is very impactful in our community, conducting analyses, and narrowing down what I wanted to focus on. Some lessons I learned were time management, utilizing my creativity, and how to conduct a feasibility analysis. The challenges I had to overcome were organizing my research and actually learning the process of writing a research paper. Then I have one more slide. So this is my finale in the closing line. The last thing I want to leave you with is this question. Will you allow your choices to burden the earth for 500 years, or will you take your action now to ensure that they only last 5? The future of our planet depends on your answer. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Wonderful job, Saashi. Thank you so much. As she just wonderfully asked, are there any questions?
Lindsay has her hand up.
Oh, wonderful. Lindsay, go right ahead.
Hi. I was just curious, what kind of, if you've seen any pushback from using polyesters, like what have you found draws people to polyesters versus using something else and being so resistant to change?
Okay, so polyester is actually a very cheap material, so that's why fast fashion brands like depend on it, because the entire business model of fast fashion revolves around efficiency and how quickly they can produce it and how quickly they can get it out into the market. So polyester is really cheap and easy for them to locate and source and manufacture. So that's why people are so resistant to change on polyester.
And as a follow-up, would you prefer your, out of the two that you narrowed down, the mycelium and the,
Yes.
forgot what the other one was called, which would you prefer? Have you seen it in person and do you have a preference for yourself?
I haven't seen it in person, but I have researched some companies, and there's one company, Anas Aman, that focuses on pineapple leather, and I think that the way they structured their company is a way that fast fashion companies would be able to input it into their already structured system, and I just like Pinatex more. I think pineapple leather is a really interesting cross between fashion and fruit, so I like Pinatex.
I didn't even know pineapple leather was a thing. I'm just
Yeah,
like today.
yeah.
Looks like Smirty has her hand raised.
Hi, yeah, wow. Congratulations, Ashley. Excellent presentation. And this was such an interesting topic. Thank you for educating all of us. I was wondering if you had the chance to share this with, friends in your circle or school or any peers, and particularly if they were ordering from Shein and other fast fashion places, what was like their reception of this? Do you think that they're going to try to change what they're doing? Is there kind of like an easy roadmap for them to follow?
So a lot of my friends are really like fast fashion companies. They're really reliant on like companies like Shein because of its low prices. I don't really
Right.
think they care about the material. So even if like those companies changed the material, as long as they kept the prices, which is I don't think that would be possible. I think they would still shop from there. But yeah.
All right. Well, it's always a first step to educate. So fantastic work. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?